Okay, lesson 4, inverse functions. If you remember, inverse by definition is just when you switch the x and y, or the inputs and outputs. That's what an inverse does. So if my regular function was like 3, 4, 5, and my outputs were 6, 7, 8, that's x, that's f of x. My inverse function would look something like this. We'd say my inverse, which would be f of x, with that little negative to the -1. Remember, that -1 means inverse function. It would just be switching the inputs and outputs. So it would be 6, 7, 8. So my outputs become my inputs, and my outputs would be 3, 4, 5. That's it. It's just when you switch your inputs and your outputs. Well, what's that look like in terms of the equation? Now this is where we remember the steps. So to see if two things are inverses, this is what I do. The first thing is to rewrite. Hold on. Rewrite that says y equals x plus 2. And what I'm trying to do is find out if these two are inverses of each other. All right? The way to do that is just find out what the inverse of the f of x is. So rewrite the f of x as y. That's step 1. Okay? Step 2, you switch your x and y, because it's just like I said, you're just switching your input and your output. All right? From here, all you're doing is solving for y. So to solve for y, I multiply both sides by 5. These cancel, and I get a 5x on this side. So 5x is equal to y plus 2. We're going to subtract 2 from both sides now. Let's move this guy down just a bit. Okay. We subtract our 2 from both sides to solve for y. And we get 5x minus 2 is equal to y. Well, that's our inverse function. And so let's look. Is this the same thing? Yeah, that is the inverse function is the same. So yes, these are inverses. Yes, they are. All right, moving down, we're going to just find the inverse. We're not saying if they are inverses, we're just going to find what the inverse is. So for this guy, it's the same exact steps. First step. Our first step is y equals 3x minus 6. We just turn f of x into y. Step 2, switch the x and y, okay? So it's going to be x equals 3y minus 6. From here, I'm just going to solve for y, so we're going to add 6 to both sides. Add 6, add 6. That cancels out. We get x plus 6 is equal to 3y. Divide all this by 3 to get y by itself. That cancels, and our final answer would be, looking at this, x plus 6 divided by 3 is equal to y. And that would be your inverse function. Now, you could stop playing it right now if you feel like you've learned it, but let's just check. I just want to check some things. I think it's cool to find out if we actually did this right. So let's look at our inverse function. Let's see, it's x plus 6 divided by 3. So our inverse function is this, or our supposed inverse function is the f negative 1 of x. Remember, that means inverse function is x plus 6 divided by 3. All right? So let's just check to see if these are inverses. So for this one, let's say I plug in 2. All right? That gives me 3 times 2 minus 6. And so the f of 2 is going to be equal to 0. So what does that mean to see if these actually are inverses? Well, that means if I plug 0 into this, my output should be 2. So let's try that out. So if I say the f of negative 1 of 0, well, let's see. Do I get 2? 0 plus 6 over 3. The f is equal to 6 over 3. And guess what? That is equal to 2. So the f is equal to 2. So you see how they reversed? 2 gives me 0. And in this case, the f of 0 gives me 2. So they switch just like that. And so, yep, we could say that they are inverses. All right, on to lesson 5.